Mara, first of all, we're so grateful that you are willing to join us and share your recovery story with us because, as we know, sharing our stories can be so impactful for someone else who might be struggling. So, thank you so much for coming on Addiction Talk.
Yeah, of course. I totally believe in that as well. I think that everyone that has an opportunity to hear kind of a, quote unquote success story, anything that can help, I'm always willing to do.
Well, let's go back to the beginning because, as you and I were just talking before we started rolling the camera, it has been 4 years since you were at Desert Hope Treatment Center. Tell
Yes.
me, how has your life transpired from the day you walked into treatment to where you are today? Because you have some pretty big news.
Oh, yes. I mean, it's really cliche, but it really is just a 180. I mean, my life changed entirely once I made that decision to go to treatment. The big news that you're referring to has built up to me having just graduated with my master's degree in counseling with a dual focus on mental health and addictions.
So I can only imagine how your own journey of going through this shaped the course of your life now, and even what you decided to get your master's in. How much of a role did that play? And when did you know that you were destined to do something in this industry to help others who were like you at one point in your life?
Yeah, I mean, I've always been passionate about helping others. I was kind of in the creative sphere before I ventured into mental health, but I have to say that the treatment experience was 100% of the reason. I hadn't really had very much interest in this type of field prior to treatment, but I do remember there was a point while I was at Desert Hope in Las Vegas, a peer that was in treatment with me actually said to me one time, "Hey, you would make a really good counselor." And it was just part of a natural back and forth we were having, just discussing our own experiences. And something about that just really stuck with me and became kind of my outlet for continuing to participate in my own recovery.
How did that impact you, knowing that you could impact somebody else? Did it give you motivation or say, I have to show people that it's possible?
It was definitely showing people that it was possible was a huge part of it. I think it was just so profound and stuck with me so much, thinking, wow, just a something I thought was an innocent conversation really helped that other person to the point where they expressed that view to me that they thought I would be good at counseling. Um, so kind of taking that idea and exiting treatment, it kind of felt like a no-brainer to me to really just dig my toes in, learn as much as I could, and try and channel that new positive energy into reaching back out and helping others.
Which we know is such a huge part of recovery. We hear that time and time again, the importance of giving back. But I know people seeing you here today and they're like, wow, she's gotten her master's. This was 4 years ago, but I want to go back to see where this all started and how you got from where you were to where you are today. So I
Yeah.
want to go back to your childhood because I know for you, drinking started at an early age. Tell me how old you were when you took your first drink and what you remember about that time in your life.
Yeah, so I was probably 10 years old the first time I took a drink of any kind. I think I was around 12 or 13 the first time that I drank enough to actually feel it. I was probably around 15 by the time it started becoming a regular thing. Um, as a child, I just kind of felt a little bit like a black sheep, I guess, was the best way to put it. Even prior to, my parents getting a divorce when I was 10, I still kind of felt that I didn't quite fit in. So I think that kind of caused some of those feelings of like, maybe I can experiment with these things and feel better. Of course, in hindsight, we know it doesn't make anything better. But as a kid, you really are just trying to find your way through the world the best way that you can. And I think growing up in rural Wisconsin, that's one of the kind of options that are in front of you. So it kind of just progressed after age 15, getting into high school. Um, and I do remember during that time in high school, it wasn't so much peer pressure. It was more seeking out those opportunities to get any kind of alcohol I could, to hang out with people that I knew that would have it. I mean, it was really something looking back that I really pursued to try and fill some kind of void.
Did you realize that what you were doing at the time, or do you think it was more like, I just need to escape my reality? I need to, need something to help me calm my nerves or whatever's going on, or this is going to make me feel better.
Right. It was definitely a feel better thing. And I think a lot of people at that age can kind of relate. You're 13, 14, 15. A lot of kids feel like they're the black sheep, even if, it's not that way in reality. You might have a lot of support, and I did, thankfully. But at the time, it really was just, how can I fix these feelings that I can't explain and I don't know how to ask for help for?
How did alcohol at the time seem like the solution? When you drank, did it make you forget your problems, or what was the feeling that you got from drinking the alcohol?
Yeah, that early in life, it was definitely about that socialization aspect and the decreased inhibitions and trying to really make connections in that way. Um, Maybe, a big part of it too was some of that, just filling in that void and having something to do, having something to look forward to, and things like that. It kind of all culminated into the snowball that it became.
How quickly, I know you said first drink 10, you remember drinking more and more, 15, you're drinking more and more. At what point do you realize, like, maybe I'm drinking too much? Did that ever dawn on you, or did you have a moment before your rock bottom moment that you started to question? Was
Yeah, there
everything
were a couple of moments before that rock bottom moment for sure. I remember um, at age 16, I was still dealing with a lot of those mental health issues like depression, anxiety. And I actually checked into a psychiatric hospital for a week. And I remember going in thinking, I'm going to be totally honest about everything. I really do want the help. And the second they started asking me about drugs and drinking, I told the truth and was recommended to participate in a adolescent alcohol program. And I was so defensive at that time and really insisted that that wasn't something that I needed. And I think looking back, that was really my first encounter with questioning my relationship with alcohol and other substances. But another profound one, I was studying abroad in Italy during college. I was 21 at the time, and I was living with a host family. And my host mom actually sat me down and talked about it with me. And I remember saying back to her, this is just my culture. This is just what we do. We go out, we party. And to me, it just seemed like, why are you judging me for this? And of course, again, looking back, I can really see where she was coming from and the care that was there and what she was able to see that I just explained away at the time. I think the next biggest kind of questioning moment was actually the same year that I went to treatment. In 2021, I was planning on spending New Year's in California with my father who lives there and a friend of mine who lived there at the time. And I missed my first flight because I had been drinking the day prior, didn't wake up on time. I scheduled another flight and I got so drunk at the airport that I was not allowed to get on the flight. So that was really the first personal time that I really noticed my behavior was not helping me get to where I wanted to go. At that point, I spent about a week and a half with sobriety as my first little dip in the pond. I
So
do
you
remember.
tried to do it yourself when you say you did your first little dip into sobriety? Was that like, oh, I'm just going to quit cold turkey and try this myself? Is that what you mean?
Yeah, pretty much. I said, wow, that airport situation was really bad. I should really take a break right now. And yeah, cold turkey, just decided that I wasn't going to have a drink. I didn't have any kind of plan as to how long or anything. But it actually ended because the restaurant I worked in, one of my customers offered me a drink and I took it, just thinking, wow, I did that. I did a week and a half.
And it sent you back down that spiral.
Yep, exactly. Mm-hmm.
Well, I know there's a really telling story in your family that happened. It was your sister's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that had to be a big moment for you that actually led you to treatment. I want you to take me back to the day or that time in your life. It was your sister's wedding.
Mm-hmm.
I know you were probably a part of the wedding and excited to be there, but things took a turn for the worse based on what you were dealing with the drinking again.
Right. Yeah. The wedding itself was in late July. I think it was July 28th or 29th. My sober date is July 29th. But the wedding was held in Mankato. I live in Minneapolis, so it was about an hour and a half drive. So my dad had gotten a hotel down there for kind of the family, a couple of rooms blocked off. Um, my boyfriend was meant to be joining me the next day, the day before the wedding. So I thought that night after dinner, I'm just going to go out and have a few drinks and just enjoy myself in this new city. And of course, as any other addicts listening, one drink rarely ends at one drink. And I ended up at that bar until it closed. I ended up leaving, trying to ask for a ride back to the hotel, and some very, very kind people noticed how inebriated I was and called the police, and the police took me to detox. At that point, of course, in my mind, life had just ended. That was the worst thing that had ever happened to me. It was the worst thing that could ever happen to anybody, in that mindset. At that point, though, I was disinvited from the wedding because, first of all, a detox visit is 3 days, and I was admitted to detox the day before the wedding. So the assumption of the family was that I was going to miss it anyway. Once I did my comprehensive assessment, though, the very nice counselor noticed that my nails were done, asked me why, and I explained that I was there for my sister's wedding, and they actually released me early. However, because all of this happened with my family in town and everyone was gathering that day to do all of the, the rehearsal dinner, the pictures, and all those fun things that you do before a wedding, I wasn't there, and it was very obvious. So everybody in my family ended up finding out very quickly. So in my mind at that point, I was sitting in detox, knowing full well that everybody who's there for the wedding knows where I am and why I'm there. And in my mind, I basically had two choices. It was end your life or accept and go to treatment. And with my history of depression, of course, that's kind of what brings those types of thoughts to my mind. But at that time in my life, I knew that I didn't want to die. I just wanted things to be different. And I wasn't quite sure how I was going to go about making things different until it was suggested to me by my sister and my uncle that I should go to treatment. And of course, I was very defensive again about it at first, just, I don't need that. I can do it on my own. And after some thought, sitting in detox and kind of self-reflecting there, it really just became the only option to make any kind of change. And so at that point, something had just flipped in my mind from defensive mode into acceptance mode. And I remember calling my partner because he was supposed to pick me up the next day. And I said, hey, you can, give Uncle Robbie a call and, do what you need to do to set things up. I'll see you tomorrow and we can talk about all the details then. And that's pretty much how it panned out. My partner picked me up. I was home for maybe 2 to 3 days, planning out the flights and talking to my uncle about, getting in. What do I need to do? I've never been to treatment before. What should I expect? And all of that. And finally, I got on a plane by myself and I went to Las Vegas and was picked up by some of the lovely people at Desert Hope.
Wow. So that moment was such a transformational period for you. But you said your Uncle Robbie. So
Yes.
Tell me about that. I understand he was working, or actually was part of American Addiction Centers, which is connected to Desert Hope Treatment Center at the time. So he had some insight into this.
Yes. Yep. My family is a very tight-knit family. And a lot of times that, people might kind of turn their nose up at that. But more often than not, I have loved that about my family. It has been such a staple for me in my life to just have everyone so interconnected. So that being said, once my aunt, my father's sister, once she found out what was happening, that was actually her very first call was to Uncle Robbie. He lived in a different state, so he wasn't at the wedding. But yeah, that was her very first call. She said, I know exactly who can help with this. And me and my Uncle Robbie, he's actually my great uncle. He is my grandmother's brother. But he has been one of those kind of presences in my life that I have just felt so much love and support from. And whether or not I see him all the time or, have that opportunity for those face to face meetings and stuff, it's very rare, but I just so appreciate all of the love that he's shown to me over my life. And my aunt, too, of course, reaching out to the one person that she knows can help on my behalf.
Yeah, and I think it's so awesome to have a family member who gets it, who says, because I can imagine, like you said, you're sitting there in detox and you're thinking, am I a bad person? Like, I'm sure there were lots of thoughts
Oh,
about
yeah,
connected to your sister's wedding, but then having somebody who's like, no, you're not. This is a disease, or just helping you to understand you really need help, you know?
absolutely. And it's a game changer. I mean, even to have someone that's willing to listen so closely to my individual needs, um, has been just amazing because there's other people in my family too that have dealt with these types of issues. My brother-in-law, for one, he's very outspoken about his own recovery journey. But the way he kind of reached his recovery journey was through religion, which is not something
Mhm.
that I've particularly found very profound in my life. And so, you know, having the treatment experience of somebody else, being projected was never something that was really going to work for me. So being able to have that, outside family member who really can just listen to what I'm looking for and what I need, it was just so different than I could have ever imagined.
Mhm. So before we tap into your treatment experience, I want to give family some advice here, because there is a family. I mean, I think I want to give it from the family and the individual experiencing it. What would you say to a family who was had a young person such as yourself during that time who had that moment? Because a lot of times I think families want to blame or all of that, and they don't understand, right? They're just going by what they feel in the moment. What would you wanted to say to a family, just remembering where you were in that moment?
Absolutely. I would say listen to your loved one. Your loved one is going to know themselves better than anybody else on the planet. They're the only people that they have to live with for the rest of their lives. Listen to them express that shame and guilt because it's so important to have someone trusted to be able to express that to. And like we were saying before, to be able to respond to some of that shame and guilt with understanding and genuine concern and care is really what somebody needs to take that first step and say, okay, if I do this, I'll be okay.
Because a lot of people don't probably realize that you in that moment are already dealing with your own shame and guilt.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we're our own worst critic, and sometimes it's amplified when you're in those types of situations. And we all know that addiction is very stigmatized. And so there's just layers and layers and layers of judgment that, not only do we have to fight through ourselves, but also from the people around us when those things happen. So to really just listen and show that genuine compassion, for what somebody's dealing with is just, it'll touch more people than you think.
Mhm. And when you look back on that moment, what would you also say to someone like yourself who may be in that position where they've made some decisions or had things happen as a result of their addiction, and now they're sitting in a place where they feel that shame and not even sure if they want to live anymore because of all that that's weighing down on them?
I will say something that was said to me very early in treatment, and that is that the best apology is changed behavior. It was something that really stuck with me because I think a lot of times when we finally, met that shame and guilt and we're ready to kind of accept some of those things that we've done that we're not so proud of, our first instinct is really to reach out and apologize. And I think in a lot of ways it might make us feel better, or we might be met with some defensiveness or hurt. We hurt other people in some of these behaviors that drugs and alcohol can induce. And so, what I would say is that, changed behavior is one of the best ways to really process that shame and guilt and move on from this time in our lives because we have a whole rest of our lives to live.
Mhm. And when you think about I love that change behavior is the best way to spur that conversation or to have that moment of forgiveness. How were you able to use that in your own life from that moment with your sister and your family to where you are now? How were you able to use that change behavior to build a pathway of forgiveness within your own family?
It's just presented so many opportunities for gratitude. And I think that's been my main way of kind of processing those feelings and rebuilding these relationships and helping my loved ones, through my journey, because we're not the only people affected by substance use when it's happening. Our loved ones are all dealing with their own battles with it. And so feeling that gratitude of, I didn't wake up with a hangover today. This is awesome. I'm going to go on a walk or call my sister or something like that. It just presents so many things to be grateful for in this life. And it just kind of keeps you going and saying, well, I keep wanting to wake up without a hangover so that I can have these connections and do these things.
And it is possible to have that rebuild,
It is. It's so possible.
Because I can imagine your sister probably when you graduated just recently was like, yay! And she's there and so excited for you, and to be able to, she's probably the one yelling the loudest, right?
Oh, she was. Oh, yeah. I got their videos and she was definitely the loudest. Yeah, she's been one of my biggest cheerleaders, which I think, if you were looking at this from an outside lens, it might seem like she may have been the person that I hurt the most, but when she turned right back around and met me with compassion, like we were talking about before, our connection just grew so much stronger. And I felt so much support from her. She called me every single week when I was in treatment and sent me care packages. And when I could feel how much she cared about what I was doing and how I was changing, it helped me to keep making those changes and to maintain those changes and to build a better relationship.
How special is that to have that special moment of her helping you through treatment and just supporting you, even, in all that went on? So I want to go back to the treatment experience because I think that's a fear for a lot of people. First, there's the denial, like, I don't need this. Like you said, you had several instances where you're like, this isn't me. I don't need it. I'm fine. I can do it on my own. And then you get to treatment. But there's still a lot of fear. People like, what is treatment like? I don't know if I can do it. Is it okay for me to go? How am I going to feel? How do you help people? What would you say to people, or how would you help them understand what it's like to go to treatment?
I got to respond with another treatment analogy that I heard very early on. And it's that the program works if you work it. It's very easy to kind of walk into that kind of place and think, well, I already know A, B, and C. All I need to know is D. Whereas when you actually walk in, you realize that what you think is A, B, and C is actually X, Y, and Z. It's a place where you really have to kind of let go of what you already know about yourself and to really just submit to the process. Even if that's all you do while you're there, even if sobriety is not something that is part of your goals or part of your future, even just to take that time to really immerse yourself in what's being taught and the types of activities going on. There's just so much that you can learn about yourself and about other people that can change your life for the better.
How were you able to submit to the process? Because I know you're saying that and people are like, that sounds so easy, but how did you get yourself to the point that you were fully submitted to benefit?
Man, it is not easy. I will tell you that. And it's hard to say if it's something that you can even really make yourself do. And I say that because when I arrived at Desert Hope, my mindset was very pre-contemplative. It was very, oh, I did this really bad thing. I should go and get some skills to make sure that that doesn't happen again. But the drinking isn't really the problem. That was kind of the mindset that I went in with, very pre-contemplative. I remember a point probably about 2 weeks into a 30-day stay. So almost half of my time at Desert Hope, I continued with that mindset. And it really wasn't until I fully started to engage in the activities and think about some of the things that I was being asked to think about. It felt like a lot of what I had built up over the years to protect myself was being bubbled away, melted away. And at a point, I remember thinking to myself, it's not just the behavior. I don't think that I can convince myself anymore just by saying that. I don't think it's just the behavior. I think it actually is the drinking. And once I was able to really sit and consciously have that thought, sit with it and really feel it, that's really when that acceptance set in that, this is never going to be something that is manageable for me. And that's something that now I'm going to have to make new goals for. And I have to think about what kind of life that I want to live in order to build it in a way that I'm going to enjoy it. So, with that flip of the switch there, and kind of letting the process do what it does and getting to that point of realizing that it's never something I was going to be able to appropriately manage, it became almost a new game for me to kind of find these other activities or hobbies or different ways to live my life that don't include alcohol, that don't include substances, that are still going to fill those voids that alcohol was there for. So that then became, now I'm researching different types of therapy for the depression I was dealing with. And I'm researching different sober activities to meet different people who don't drink and who don't participate in drug use or anything like that. And that was kind of the new way of participating in the program. So if you look at it kind of from the outside, again, it kind of started out as this like resistant, I'll dip my feet in, but I'm not really in it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Feeling that, if I actually want this change in my life, I have to make this change of never drinking again. And it was then that it became a new process of building rather than tearing down a lot of those walls that I was building.
And that's so true. I think that's so powerful what you said, Mar. You went in there thinking, well, I can just control the behavior, right? I can just make some behavior modifications so it doesn't get out of control. But then you're in that moment and you realize, no, this is a problem with this substance, right? I can't actually ever have this substance again. And that has to be like a huge wake up call. Do you think that reality came being immersed day in and day out in the treatment? Or what do you think caused that light bulb switch?
I think that had a huge part to do with it, especially being with the peers that I was with. I don't know if I was just really lucky in my experience, but the people that I was with were just so open about their own experiences. And like I had said in the beginning, some of these like small conversations or casual conversations turn out to be extremely profound in an environment like that, where honesty is so rewarded. And so I think by interacting with a lot of my peers and kind of seeing the patterns in their lives and having trained mental health and addiction counselors on staff almost 24/7, it was much easier to kind of see some of those patterns in other people's lives or having other people point them out for me to really internalize it for myself. So to be honest with you, I don't know if I would have had the success that I did without, some kind of inpatient stay where that was my primary focus. I think a lot of times people can get caught up in the stress of life as well. And I was very lucky, and still am, to have a partner that, supports me in those things and was really willing to kind of hold the household down while I was able to focus on myself. And so a lot of those factors just contributed into it being, a really life-changing experience and successful, I would say.
Well, I think also when you can be in an environment, you can cut everything out, like you said, like you're hyper focused, and then you're in a place of authenticity where
Yes.
people are showing up and like, here's my, I'm exposing all of me, and allows you to be vulnerable. And then you're like probably seeing some of yourself in them. Like, we are very similar. We may have different drugs sometimes or different ways that it's expressed, but there are similarities here. So people start to realize that it's not just them. And I think that feeling of not feeling like you're alone, like I'm not this major problem person, that this is something that impacts a lot of people, I think probably it was very eye opening for you as well. So as you were going through treatment, what were some things that surprised you that you learned either about yourself or what treatment was really like?
Oh boy, I think the one thing that I learned about myself during that time was how important routine and identity are. I think those were really my two biggest takeaways as far as personal things. As far as the treatment experience, I was surprised how fun it was. And again, I don't know if I just got really lucky having amazing peers and an amazing program, but it became, volleyball every single night, and someone's knocking on my door at 5 a.m. because, hey, you got to be up for our meditation in the morning. And that was just so surprising how much of a community was formed even on day one. It was like you walk into a communal room, everyone looks at you and they're like, hey, come on in, which is very different from a lot of other environments. And so I think out of treatment in general, that was one of, the most surprising things.
Mhm. So, what would you say to someone who has that fear, who they hear your story, they're like, wow, this sounds okay. Maybe it's not what I'm anticipating. But what would you say to someone who has that fear or trepidation about going to treatment?
I think I would actually ask them a question. I would ask if they're okay with living their life this way forever, or if they're willing to do something to improve it in any way. I think that's kind of what the question of, choosing to go to treatment really boils down to. And that's really where, personally, I think, coming from my own experience, of course, where someone really needs to be to commit to that type of decision. So, if we're already at that point and stuff, what I would really say to someone to help dispel some of that fear is to make it your own. Make the process entirely your own. It's a
Mhm.
chance to really take control over your own life. And in a lot of ways, it's an opportunity to realize what we do and don't have control over. And so, whether or not, there are anxieties or fears or things like that in the way, the overall opportunity to better yourself, to change yourself, to have these moments of growth, it far outweighs any of those kind of what ifs.
Mhm. And how did you get to the point in your mind of reconciling in your mind, I will never be able to drink again?
That's a tough question. It's something
Is
that
it a day by day thing?
I mean, yeah, it's very cliche, but I think at the very beginning, right when I had that flip switch, it has to be day by day. Because I think once you kind of come to that realization, the very next thing is the overwhelming feelings that come with, I'm never going to do this again. It
Mhm.
sounds so definite. It sounds so forever. And it's very overwhelming to think about your current lifestyle never being that way again. And so, in that way, one day at a time comes into play where it might even have to be 1 hour at a time, and just for this next hour, I'm going to be sober. For this next day, I'm going to be sober until it just became a part of my routine. Drinking was never something that was a part of it after treatment and just never re entered after I made that commitment.
Mhm. Was there a tool or something you learned in treatment that still sticks with you 4 years later?
Absolutely. Oh my goodness. I mean, obviously there's a few, but one of my favorite things that I kind of learned or realized in treatment was that um, we are only responsible for ourselves. And in that way, we are never responsible for or have control over, more importantly, the reactions, feelings, or behavior of others, but we do for ourselves. Anything we can't control about somebody else, we can for ourselves. And so, looking at my life the way it was, it kind of forced me to realize that it is that way because I made it that way. But on the
Mm.
flip side of that, it doesn't have to be that way because I made it that way. I can make it something else now. And so to have kind of that thought process coming out of treatment, it made it a lot easier to kind of disregard some of those feelings of judgment from others or some of that stigma coming out of treatment and being very honest about my experiences. Just thinking about how important it was to me to have control over my own life just became everything to me.
And realizing that you have, I think sometimes we forget how much control we really have. And as
Right.
I think about you coming out of treatment, right? What many people wonder, what's that first year like? What was your first year like in sobriety? How would you describe it?
This might be another treatment cliche, but boring, very boring. And it probably doesn't sound like great to say something like that, but I'm just being totally honest. We build up these lifestyles that we have for so long. I was probably drinking nearly daily for almost 10 years. And so once you come out of a situation where it's not available to you, you've built this routine without it, and you've committed to a lifestyle without it, you come out kind of saying, what do I do now? And now it's just time to explore different hobbies and different activities, meet new people. And it's a lot of fun to do those things, but it is really boring, you know? And so I encourage anybody who is, in early recovery or thinking about treatment or something like that, think about what you like to do. Think about who you are as a person and what your life might be like outside of treatment, because it becomes important a lot sooner than people might think.
And what did you find out about your own life? Did you pick up ukuleles? No, I'm kidding. I'm sure you picked up some new things. So what did you ended up finding about yourself or discovering or exploring during that season?
Yeah, so I discovered that I am a really big fan of backpack camping. So throughout my whole life, I've always loved camping, but I had always associated it with the type of camping where you drive your car up, you take your tent out, you set up the tent. What I got into is a little bit different, where your tent, your sleeping bag, everything goes in your backpack on your back, and you've got like 10 miles down the trail until your tent gets set up. So that's one thing that I probably never would have tried when I was drinking or anything, that I've gotten really into. And the other is roller skating, actually.
I used to love to roller skate.
I love it. I love roller skating. It's a great
It's
way.
harder than it looks too.
Mhm.
It's good exercise.
Yeah, definitely.
So it's almost like you discovered new parts of yourself, or it forced you to discover, going through this sobriety journey, discover different parts of yourself. And now that you're 4 years out, does it get easier after that 4 years? Or do you find like it's still something that is always in the back of your mind?
I'd say my answer is a little bit in the middle.
Okay.
And I am coming from a little bit of a different experience, where I've had a master's degree program as kind of a time occupier for the past couple of years. And I actually started that program pretty soon after treatment. So I have been kind of lucky in that sense to have something that, can take up a lot of that time and attention and energy. But those kind of feelings of, well, it's a Friday night, I could just go out to the bar. Those types of things don't necessarily leave my brain, but they do become a lot less important over time. I think for the first maybe 2 years, that was a little more like fear of missing out, like, oh, I could be doing this, that, and whatever. And now it just becomes a fleeting thought when I pass by a bar or restaurant, like, oh, I could be there, but I'm not. And it's just whoop, in and out. And so I think it's probably very different person to person, and how those types of thoughts occur, or what types of, activities really help fill that kind of boredom or that void. But I would say for myself, it was kind of gradual into, it still pops into my head every once in a while, but I think I've got enough going on to be able to stop that thought in its tracks.
Well, I have a couple last questions for you, because I know these are questions that people always want to know. If you had to answer, what 3 things do you need to stay sober? I think this is a great question, because for everyone it may be different, but what 3 things do you feel you need to stay sober?
Absolutely. Number one is a routine, definitely. Especially when we're talking about those habits of, well, it's Friday night, I could just go to the bar, or those periods of boredom. Just having a routine that you can really fall back on is so important to just keeping that motivation and maintaining those behaviors and that lifestyle moving forward for a very long time. The second thing is definitely the social support. I've talked quite a bit about my family and how open and supportive we are of each other. My amazing partner, I've been with for 7.5 years. He has been just so supportive, amazing. And my friends who never, ever, ever looked at me with an ounce of judgment, who took me out to dinner right before I left and took me out to dinner right when I got home, and wanted to find all these cute ways to keep me involved in social things. It's priceless. It's just priceless. And then the third thing is definitely a belief in myself. And I say that with a little bit of, trepidation, because it's so abstract, but it is so important to want to have a good life. And to want to have a good life, I need to respect myself and love myself enough to know that I deserve to have the best life that I can build for myself. So those are my three things.
So you made me think of something before
Mhm.
I asked you the final question. How did you get to the point of feeling like you deserved? Because I think a lot of people believing in themselves or feeling like they're enough is so hard. It seems like you said it's abstract and it seems like it would be like, of course, just believe in yourself. But for a lot of us, it is not that
Mhm.
easy. It is a process. So, how did you get there?
Yeah, earlier I had mentioned identity as one of the main things that kind of stuck with me through treatment. And I think that's really the thing that I can point to, um, that really helped me develop that self love and self respect. I had that opportunity at Desert Hope to let go of everything else around me and really look inwards at who am I? What do I want? What do I do for this world? And once I was really able to look inside and see who I am and what I can be and everything that makes me me, it really changed the way that I see myself and the way that I see my life moving forward. And of course, another treatment quote to share that I think I've already said actually is that I'm the only person that I'm going to live with for the entire rest of my life. I'm the only person I ever have and
Mhm.
the only person I ever will. And so I am the most important person in my life. Recovery sounds like such a selfish process, and it is. And I just think it's so important to really latch onto that and really be proud of that fact that, it's selfish to really just look at what you want and need in life and to go out and make it happen. And so I think that was really the way that I built that kind of self-esteem and self-love and self-respect was just really identifying with myself.
I love that. Just having that time of self reflection and just having a moment of self reflection now as you think about you graduated. And
Yeah.
so now, of course, your next step is to go back and help others who are like yourself 4 years ago. What
Yes.
emotions are going through you as you think about, like, wow, one day, hopefully one day soon, you are going to be what somebody else was for you?
So funny enough, I am already in that role.
You
Uh,
are okay. I
yes.
see.
Thank you. Yes, I am a clinical support counselor right now. And I work in a residential addictions facility. It's dual diagnosis, so mental health and addictions concerns, we treat both. It's a women's only residential facility, so a little bit different than my experience. But in my time in internship and now in kind of a more fully fleshed out role, it has been such a roller coaster of emotions, especially being in the counselor role versus the client role. Um, to have the choice to really use my experience or to not use my experience has been one of the most interesting things to me in having those periods of, you know, relating to your story a bit. Like I see myself in you, or I see, those things that I can draw upon, but I can also, now that I've been through the school and have the skills, I can really just objectively listen to what somebody's experience might be like. And so that kind of range of relating and feeling for myself and having to let myself go and all of these different emotions have just made it such a progressive journey of growth. I mean, we think about going to school as a growing experience educationally, but personally, being in that environment with these clients who are at square one where I was so 4 years ago, it's very inspiring to be in that position. It's very hard to see a lot of the things that I've seen, but it's so fulfilling to be able to meet some of those challenges and be able to take on some of the challenges of other people that people took on for me at that time and made it easier for me to deal with. If I could just make it easier for one other person to kind of make it through that next challenge and that next day of sobriety, that's what it's all for.
It was, yeah, definitely. That is huge. And I wonder, I said that was the last question, but something popped up. Have you ever saw you walk in the door?
Absolutely. 100%. And I remember this was during my internship as well. I remember going into supervision that week and I said, I need you to pay attention to this relationship because I see it. And my supervisor said, oh, yeah, I see it too. Good on you for looking at that.
That was me.
Yeah, I mean, and those are some of the hardest to work with though, because you can see so much of yourself in that other person and just see the potential that somebody might have and want to do things for them or want to figure it out for them, and to have to take a step back and let that person reach the growth in the same type of environment that I was able to reach that growth in. It's so important.
But I think you are a testament that what can happen when you surrender to the process, that you
Yeah.
go to treatment, that you're willing to take those hard looks in yourself, look at yourself and look at where you are today. So first of all, congratulations again on your master's and for giving back in the way that you are, in that special way that somebody is looking at you like you once looked at one of our therapists at, Desert Hope Treatment Center. And we wish you all the best, Mar. And I know you're going to do great things. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you sharing your journey with us. And
Yeah.
great.
Of course. Thank you for having me. It was great being able to share, and hopefully this reaches someone that would appreciate some of these messages.